Hello! Today I am here with a review for an artist that I am almost certain no one in my little small YouTube community has heard of. First of all, I do want to just preface this video by saying, first of all, thank you to the 312, I believe was the last time I checked, people who have subscribed to this channel. I'm actually kind of blown away by it. I know that may not sound like a lot to some people, but to me that's a lot of people who have decided, and it's even more who have just viewed these videos in general and who have found them interesting. So, I mean, I've only been doing this for about 6 months, really, and the fact that I was able to get there in that space of time really is quite exciting to me. But, you know, I don't care about views. I just love to possibly highlight artists to other people that they may not have heard of. And that's something what I'm doing with this artist and this review, which is kind of like a spotlight on an artist who I don't know how I happened to discover this person, but it was just the right thing at the right time, and I became hooked on this artist, and they've been active for quite some time, about 17 years now, possibly even longer. And I just wanted to say that I am starting to get, with a growing channel, more and more suggestions of artists to review and albums to review, and I do take them all into consideration. I've got so many albums I want to go through as I've been, you know, slowly going through them. I would like to go through them a little faster, but this isn't the only thing I'm doing, so I can't devote all of my time and energy into these. These reviews, as you can see, are quite long and lengthy, and they do take up a lot of time to make, and I am trying to do, like, really good research for them. So this review is actually going to be a little bit shorter because I'm actually reviewing an ambient electronica artist, which means there's no lyrics to any of these songs. So phew, no lyrical analysis. That chaps like half the review, but still, I really want to give these albums justice, so I don't want to just rush out reviews of things, so I've been holding off on a lot of artists. There's a lot of artists that I've been getting suggestions for that I still need to get further into their work. I need to, like, listen, and it's hard, you know, there's like so much music out there, and it's a little bit overwhelming, and I kind of had, when I started this channel, wanted to go through a lot of the artists that I already loved that I needed to get reviews out of the way, and I was hoping to get that done within the first year of this channel. And then once I got a lot of those done, I would be a little bit more open to listening to newer music and then putting out reviews. Obviously, I'm putting out reviews of things that are coming out in the moment, but I have so much history to go through. So this is kind of the first example of an artist that I know no one asked for, but I just had to put these out. This is the debut album by Norwegian electronic ambient producer named Amethystium as his acronym or his name, but his real name is Øystein Ramfjord. He's from Trondheim in Norway, and he's probably close to 40 years old now, and he's been putting out music. This album I'm reviewing, which is called Odonata, was released on August of 2001, so quite a long time, but he actually had an EP that came out in 1999, which actually had some of these songs on it, but then were later repurposed into a full-length album in 2001. He released them on his own sort of like record label, Neurodisc Records, and they sort of made waves in the sort of new age electronica sphere. If anyone is familiar with the new age group 2002, or maybe Enigma to some extent, you might have heard of Amethystium. Also, you know, there's like Deep Forest and Gandalf. There's those kind of like more sort of ambient, meditative, they always play it in like spas, that kind of music. Well, Amethystium is a little bit unique. This music isn't necessarily just, you know, contemplative meditation music that you just sort of have on the background. A lot of that becomes somewhat elevator music and isn't actually really something that you would actually listen to actively. Amethystium is unique for me, and there's a few other artists like him, but he really stood out as something that made it is meditative music, and it is great for that sort of thing if you want to use it for that, but it is so much more. It actually has real choruses and real song structures within it that actually makes it actively very interesting to listen to, kind of like a soundtrack. So, you know, the visuals are very easily conjured up by the soundscapes that he employs. I mean, he uses a wide variety of instruments, but a lot of them are composed through, you know, a synthesizer or some sort of MIDI computer generated sound. But he does have some live instruments incorporated, particularly drums and some wind flute instruments as well. Odonata is his first album. Odonata is the Latin scientific name for a dragonfly, and dragonflies became sort of the image or the logo for Amethystium, at least in his early years, and that was sort of crafted because of this album. The frustrating thing about him being so unknown is he's pretty much given no interviews, and he doesn't have there's not a lot of information about these songs. So I'm kind of just compiling from my own experience listening to these songs. I discovered Amethystium in the summer of 2012, so not that long ago. And it was like an instantaneous love and affection for his music, and I quickly ate up all of his albums that he now has out currently. But Odonata is his first, and I would recommend it for a starting point if you're going into his music, and one could argue it's his strongest record. There's 14 songs. They're all very unique and yet very cohesive at the same time. They kind of tell a story, but they also don't enough. As I said, there's no lyrics that you don't necessarily have to have them form one. But I definitely see a story in this, and some could consider it's like the journey of a dragonfly as the kind of character. Definitely evoking a lot of different spiritual elements. He uses a lot of, there's Catholic choral singing incorporated with, Hindi, Sanskrit prayers. There's, although you can never tell the lyrics, they're very vague, and there's not a lot of vocalization to begin with. But he's pulling in a lot of different cultures and music. There's a lot of Eastern, a lot of specifically Japanese influence. And then there's just a lot of just techno and house and dubstep inspirations that, this was made in the late 90s, so it has a little bit of a dated sound if you're looking for that kind of electronic music. If you're interested in like future sound of London also, you would definitely be interested in Amethystium, because especially some of earlier future sound of London stuff is a lot more sort of in the sort of vein of this electronica. I call it dreamwave electronica because it is very shimmery, it's very ethereal and airy, and there's a lot of reverb going on, similar to Enigma. The title song is almost the song I want to spend the most time talking about. Not the title song, but the first song on this record, which is called Opaque. This was the song that instantly hooked me into this album and in general. If you listen to one Amethystium song, this is the song I recommend you listen to. You don't necessarily even have to listen to any of his other work, although I recommend it if you enjoy it. Opaque is the gateway song to his music. It is 3 sections that each employ a different sort of melodic structure and rhythm, and they have just in the background a basic pulse. It's very rhythmic, it's very sensual, it's very shimmery, and it's sad and yet hopeful. As you know, that's something I always love about the music I listen to, and it's just all of these things. It's hard to describe it in any other way. The synthesizer layering is exquisite. Sometimes he gets a little chaotic and discordant, but this song does not have any of that. Everything is artfully and craftfully placed to create this amalgamation of sound that is just so inviting and intoxicating and very spiritual. I see this song as something, it's hard to describe, honestly. I mean, I viewed a lot of when I got into this music, I was very into like new age spirituality, and not to say that I'm not into it anymore, but I have a little bit stepped back from that a teeny bit. I have to be a little bit more in the real world right now as a 24-year-old. It really sucks. So I don't spend a lot of time thinking about chakras and ascension and dimensional structures and stuff. But when I was really getting into his music, that's the imagery that I was conjured up in my head. I mean, this is that, DMT, ecstasy, like if you took ayahuasca, that kind of stuff. But trust me, I don't take drugs when I listen to his music. I don't do drugs, period. I don't know if Oystein does drugs. He probably has in the past, but his music, it can be a little trippy and druggy, but I don't know. I'm very creative and imaginative, so I don't need drugs to find what I want from his music. But it's the kind of music where you see sound and hear colors. That's all I need to say. The rest of the next track, Iona, sort of more sets the scene. Opaque was more of this like actual song. Iona is a little bit more like ambient, but just with a little bit of a melody carrying through. It sort of sounds like the seaside. I think of Iona. I think of this island that I think is in Scotland that I once visited. I don't know if it has anything to do with that, but it's like this barren landscape with the dramatic cliffs. Enchantment, the third track, is a lot more witchy and a lot more soft, and it's a little bit more ritualistic and a little bit more Eastern. There's some nice rhythmic percussion that sort of instruments that, oh my god, they're from all over the spectrum of the Eastern influence. With a little bit of an Egyptian slant to it, and it's called Enchantment, so you get the idea of a spell being cast. It's really hard to, with a lot of these songs, to just, explain how they feel. I mean, Dream Dance is probably one of the most upbeat and energetic songs, so if you wanted to do like a yoga session where things were getting really intense, or, some sort of workout, Dream Dance is the track for you. This is a little bit more hyper, a little bit more, but yet still in that aesthetic of like Eastern, but also a little Egyptian, a little bit Native American. All of these things blended together, all of these cultures just mixed up and mashed in an electronic soup. But trust me, it's not all over the place in any way. These songs have a direction that they go in. A lot of these songs are, some of them are longer, but some of them are actually shorter and have a very clear beginning, middle, and end. Tinuviel is another highlight. Now, if any Tolkien fans out there, if you know what Tinuviel means, it's basically the name that was given to Luthien, who is this figure in the mythos of Tolkien's Lord of the Rings legendarium. And if you read the Silmarillion and the tale of Beren and Luthien, Luthien is an elven maiden who falls in love with a mortal man, Beren. It's similar to the story of Arwen and Aragorn in Lord of the Rings. In fact, Arwen and Aragorn reference Beren and Luthien, and Luthien Tinuviel is basically the name that Beren gives her when he sees her in the forest. Tinuviel is like an elvish word for light. I can't remember, but Tinuviel is this beautiful synthesizer flute. That's pretty much all it is, but it's just this haunting, mournful kind of melody that is very simplistic, but really reaches the heart. And it sort of speaks to this sort of longing for a connection that you can't have, which is, Luthien and Beren, they fall in love with each other, and it's difficult because Luthien has to give up her immortality to marry a mortal man, and she ends up doing so. So it's this very sort of like Shakespearean tragedy, but they do end up happily together, except they both die. But, it would have been nice if Beren could become immortal, but it couldn't go that way. It has to go the other way around. And if you know Lord of the Rings, it's the exact same situation with Arwen and Aragorn. Avalon is very mysterious. It has a flute, an Eastern flute employed that carries the melody, and in the background we just have this slow, very kind of, I almost feel like it's a little bit Polynesian, or it's a little bit Southeast Asian, something around there. It's this very slow, kind of like what you'd hear in a temple, and it's very, again, ritualistic. But it's so otherworldly and ethereal. Again, I highly recommend. These songs are quite out there. There's a little bit of children heard in the background, which is a little bit strange to me. I'm not sure what that's meant to be in there, but it's just in the background of this song. So there's some trippy elements to this. Calantha, which I think is a Sanskrit word, is another song where it kind of plays off of Avalon, but it kind of builds a little bit more. There's a little bit more of a orgasmic release to that song, whereas Avalon is just sort of a song that just sort of has this steady pace. It doesn't really go anywhere beyond that. Odyssey has some of the only vocalizations that we hear, which I believe are produced by Oystein himself. I mean, again, especially at this time early on, he's just a one-man project, He's just doing everything himself. It signals the beginning of a journey, so you hear a lot of instruments that you would hear like with this sort of like drum roll. There's like this energy, pent up energy being released. Fairyland is like Tinuviel, except a little bit less memorable in my opinion. It's a little bit more just filler for me. It's cute, but I can tell that this is an experiment, that he's sort of working with these instruments, and some of them he does get a little bit more refined with later on. He employs more like actual orchestral and live instruments more so in his later records. This record is almost all computer generated, with just the drums and some of the Eastern like cymbals and chimes being the only thing that's not computer generated to my knowledge. Paean has a real rhythm, and it's very distinct and all over the place. It took a while for me to grab and get interested in this song, but actually it's not too different from Opaque in the sound structure once you really listen to the two songs. Arcane Voices uses the chants, the Gregorian chanting of what you consider like Christian music, which is then employed to this very spaced out, reverb filled Enigma sound, and it's straight up Enigma. I mean, Arcane Voices could be on an Enigma album, and I wouldn't think anything of it because it sounds exactly like an Enigma track. And I have a feeling Oystein was aware of Enigma and was probably very inspired by Enigma to make Arcane Voices. It has a really nice flute breakthrough towards the end, which just accents the song, because otherwise it's pretty and it definitely gets you feeling a certain way emotionally, but that just adds that extra levity to it. Then we have Ascension. This is another song where the title kind of dictates what you think about. I mean, the song literally climbs the ladder. It gets higher and higher and higher. And again, tons of flutes. Very Eastern. This is definitely something that I could see, you know, in a yoga class where the guru is playing the music. I mean, I don't want to think of it like that in a cheesy way. And I definitely am in a state of my life right now where it sometimes will seem kind of cheesy for me to think of it like that. This is not necessarily just music that your yoga instructor would put on for you. I really do see it as more than that. It's music you can run to, exercise to, play in the car. It tells a story. Ethereal, the penultimate track, samples some live recordings from a space mission in outer space from NASA. I'm not entirely sure what. Again, there's no info, but it's actually some pretty famous recordings that they use, basically looking back down at the Earth. And it also, again, is just this very triumphant, very joyful melody that sort of speaks to sort of the climax of the record. You know, we have Ascension and Ethereal, and these two songs are sort of the most esoteric and the most sort of triumphant in their sound. And then we end the album with a song, Lhasa. Now, Lhasa, I don't know much about it except it's the capital of Tibet, although you don't want to say that in China because, you know, Tibet doesn't technically have a capital. But Lhasa is the spiritual capital of Buddhism, actually, in Tibet. And it's where the Dalai Lama is supposed to live. However, as we know, the Dalai Lama is in exile in India because of China. Bit of an interesting situation there, unfortunately. But that is where the Dalai Lama is supposed to be. And that's where, you know, a lot of the monks still worship and practice in Lhasa. So very Eastern influence. It's a little bit shorter, and to be honest, I'm not entirely sure why it's at the end of the album. I would have personally put it more in the middle and ended it with the Ethereal or Ascension, but hey, it just sort of rounds up the sound. It's sort of like, well, here's just a mixture of all the Eastern sounds you heard on this album. Let's just close it out with that. All in all, I really do recommend giving this a listen. I'm not entirely sure if this review is going to be convincing to anyone. It's really hard to discuss this music because, like I said, there's just so little info out there about it. If anyone does happen to know any more info about Amethystium and some of these songs, because there's just so little that he's talked about with this music. And Wikipedia, there's literally nothing on him, so you know, that's what it is. But he's actually, you know, he's definitely, this album has sold okay in new age market. There are a few vague interviews that you can find out there, but all in all, I mean, he's just a very interesting, atmospheric, someone I'd really love to sit down and have a conversation with, because there's just so much that inspired. I know he did talk about some of these songs are inspired by his childhood. The Dragonfly series, for example, has a lot to do with, you know, visions and ideas that he had as a child. I mean, he started working on these albums, some of these songs, when he was only 18, 17 years old. And so, you know, he was young when he started out in this, and he was just putting them online. And eventually in Norway, he got enough people interested that he was able to actually, you know, put them on an actual CD and sell it. And now they've charted in the top 10 on Billboard for new age albums when they're released. I mean, in the US. So, I mean, they definitely, it's just new age music doesn't get any sort of press or recognition. So the fact that it charts in that doesn't make any difference to the actual billboards, but he has had that success. He's probably one of the big Norwegian exports in electronica. So yeah, like I said, if you like Mythos, if you like Delirium, if you like Enigma, definitely check him out. And we'll review his other albums. He has technically 4 other albums out now, and I do plan on going through all of them. His latest was released in 2014, and I'm hoping that he's definitely working on a new one. I'm hoping that he releases another album. It would be his 6th studio album in the new year, possibly, maybe later, but who knows. So I hope you enjoyed this review. I look forward to continuing with more reviews in the new year. I'll be doing a lot of different artists all over the place. No real particular order, but I do have like kind of an order I want to go through them. And of course, any new releases that happen to come out along the way as well. So I thank you for watching. Peace, love, and light. Happy New Year. Bye.